The following episode of Josh's Vlog Game Consoles is brought to you by Modularity Networks, helping to build small businesses through web hosting, domain registration, and design. Be sure to head over to indiegogo.com/modularity to learn more, put in a donation, and be sure to tell them Josh sent you.
Hello YouTube subscribers, Omega Apex 128 back for the third and final part of the big Sega Genesis review. So last time when I left you off, we ended with the Sega CD. Aesthetically presentable as it may be, this is what it looks like right now. So what was Sega going to do? They had the Sega Genesis, the Model 2 Genesis, Mega Drive, and the Sega CD, both versions. The front tray loading mechanism, and then the wart that attaches itself to the Genesis. So where were they going to go next? With the release of the Super Famicom in Japan and the Super NES in America, Sega decided that they were going to leapfrog forward and find a way that they could be better once again, where the Sega CD did not help to meet that need. So, to say the least, they started focusing more on the development of the Sega Saturn, but had a huge delay, and in the meantime worked on a codenamed Project Mars, which would become the Sega 32X, which is this. Again, I'm not really sure why. I mean, that's really all you can say up to this point in time. The console itself was originally released in the United States at a price tag of $160. I say console. Look at this thing. This is just a mushroom, first of all. Second of all, it required its own power adapter, so that's three now. The Genesis, the Sega CD, and the 32X all require their own separate power adapters. There was a plan to have a console called the Neptune, if I'm not mistaken, where it would just be a standalone 32X, which is what it should have been to begin with, but they never did it. So, now we have the Sega CD, the Sega Genesis, and on top of that, the 32X. This is really starting to get heavy. So you got all these connection ports in the back that were all required to get the system to work. And even then, there weren't really a whole lot of games on the 32X that really impressed or anything like that by any means. The 32X also actually required the use of another cable. If you did not have this hooked up, the sprite layer on all of your games, that palette wouldn't appear on the screen, so everything would show up invisible. If you were going to play a game like Sonic or something like that, basically Sonic, the rings, enemies, none of that stuff would be visible. I mean, you know, you got the backgrounds and everything like that. That's no problem. Maybe the timer, but without this cable, none of that would be visible. And so, you know, you had to always make sure that you had it hooked up properly. Not only that, but the 32X library of games, I think it's just absolutely hilarious. Here's the box right here for it, and it actually says right here on the front of the box, full library of new 32-bit 32X games. That was the point of the system, to make it 32-bit. More colors, faster processor, it was to be better. But the games didn't even break 100 games. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it broke 50 games. The library of games were very small, and there really wasn't a whole lot to impress. One of my favorites that happens to be on the 32X is advertised on the box, Doom. Doom is a great game, but whereas the 32X graphics looked absolutely wonderful and what we were all looking for in Doom, you look at the NES version, the music was better on the NES, there were more levels on the NES, more secrets on the NES, but there was not near as much on the Sega 32X. The only thing that was there were the graphics. So, I mean, it wasn't the greatest by any means. Now, I mean, if it would have been on like the 3DO, like Wolfenstein was, I mean, like I said before, I pop in Wolfenstein on 3DO and play that any day of the week. It's absolutely amazing. But this, not so much. Not only that, but if you played your original Genesis games in it, it's also been known to actually corrupt your games. There were issues with the aesthetic presentation about the console, like originally falling over. The FCC was not happy at all with it. I mean, they were not following FCC guidelines whenever. I mean, this was very hastily released. So not a whole lot of games were made. It was screwing up Genesis games. The power base converter that I mentioned in the Sega Genesis, obviously the cartridge slot is the same size as the original cartridge slot. A lot of people ask me if the power base converter will work. First of all, I don't know why you would want to stack up anything even higher than this as it is right now. I mean, this, you know, we're talking a good 6 inches high. I mean, that's completely unnecessary, first of all. Second of all, no, it doesn't work. Not exactly sure why. I want to say it's because I believe there was another video cable with the power base converter, and there was just all the ports were taken up. I'm sure you could probably special build or special order a power base converter cable if you wanted to do it with the 32X, but I don't know why you would, to be honest with you. Anyway, that's about all the more there is to say. On top of their celebrated failure, they started releasing Sega CD 32X games. I happen to have Corpse Killer over there, and I've played it a couple times before. I was kind of wondering how it would work. The communication between all three pieces of hardware just to play it on a CD. I thought maybe that like Sega CD 32X games would be both on a cartridge and a CD. It was just on a CD. I played it, and Corpse Killer was definitely not a good game at all. It actually froze several times while I was trying to play it, and it just, I mean, I couldn't get through it. I mean, there was no story there. It was a pointless game, really. There's probably some more that are notable, but not really any that's really worth the time. I've never personally played any of my Genesis games in the 32X because I heed the warning and I don't want my Genesis games to get screwed up. So I don't even know. I don't know. Do I even own a 32X cartridge? I don't. I don't even have any 32X games except the Sega CD 32X, a Corpse Killer. So I mean, that's saying something right there. I mean, I could, if I tried hard enough, I could probably have the whole Sega 32X library in a day or whatever, but that's just whatever. So anyway, this concludes the 3-part review of the Sega Genesis, Sega CD, and the Sega 32X. We covered a time frame of about 1988 up until 1994. That's when the 32X came out anyway. So we've talked a lot about the Sega, and you know, it's a very great console to say the least. But the Genesis really should have stopped after the CD. The CD, we knew it should have been its own console. It was an add-on. The fact that they did the 32X as an add-on again, that was a mistake. The Sega Saturn would soon be coming up in its lifespan. But actually, what I believe what we're going to be going ahead and do next time, we're going to jump a little bit farther ahead than the Sega Saturn, and we'll actually be covering another console by Sega that I think is probably one of the greatest consoles of all time, next to, you know, to the consoles of today anyway. It's still very popular today with homebrew, and it also ran on Windows operating system as well. So be sure to keep playing video games, and until next time, we're going to be doing the Sega Dreamcast, and that should be pretty fun. So this is Josh Beach signing off, Josh's vlog. Keep playing video games. Sega Dreamcast is coming up next.